Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We often hear this historical generalization that ancient India never really projected military power overseas. Well, the Chola Empire, which started in the fertile Kaveri River Valley, completely shatters that misconception. They forged an absolute iron grip over the waves. So that brings up a really fascinating question. How exactly did an ancient kingdom from the deep south of India project its military might thousands of miles across open, treacherous oceans, and do it in the 11th century without steamships or airplanes to definitively rule the Indian Ocean? Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the Oceanic Superhighway. Second, the merchant mega-guilds. Third, building a naval superpower. Fourth, the Srivijaya surprise attack. And finally, the legacy of the thalassocracy. Let's start with Section 1, the Oceanic Superhighway, the ancient world's most lucrative route. To get why the stakes were so incredibly high, you have to look at the geography. For centuries, ships sailing between the east and west basically had to stop in both South India and Malaya to restock and trade. But as shipbuilding tech leveled up, vessels got sturdier. They started skipping the Indian ports entirely and going straight to Malaya. Think of it like a massive new highway bypassing a small town. It was a huge geopolitical crisis that threatened to cut the Cholas out of some serious customs revenues. And we aren't just talking about a few small-time merchants here. The Cholas were the central hub connecting literally the biggest economies on the planet at the time. You had the booming Song dynasty in China moving massive loads of silk, and the Fatimid Caliphate in the Middle East demanding precious spices. The Cholas absolutely had to maintain their grip on this network, or they'd be facing economic irrelevance. Moving right along to Section 2, the merchant mega-guilds, or basically the corporate war chest. Now, the Cholas built what's known as a thalassocracy. It's a bit of a fancy word, but it essentially means a state that projects power through its maritime realms. Quite literally, an empire at sea. And the true engine powering this oceanic empire, it was the immensely wealthy Tamil trade guilds. There's this amazing 11th century inscription where the 500 lords of Ayavole, one of the biggest guilds, were openly bragging about their power. They boast about traversing continents, filling up the emperor's treasury, and literally supplying his weapons. They were entirely bankrolling the Chola military. These mega guilds were basically the ancient equivalent of multinational corporations. I mean, they were so well-funded, they commanded their own private mercenary armies. They negotiated independent foreign deals and lent huge sums of gold directly to the emperors. So naturally, if these corporate giants had their trade routes threatened, you better believe the royal military was going to step in. Which brings us to Section 3, building a naval superpower, the Chola war machine. With all that corporate funding, the Chola emperors constructed a navy unlike anything the world had ever seen. Just to grasp the scale, over 800 warships made up the Chola Armada. 800. That was the absolute zenith of ancient Indian sea power. They essentially turned the massive Bay of Bengal into their own private lake. The technology on these ships is just wild. Instead of using rigid iron nails that would snap in rough ocean waves, the shipwrights expertly stitched the wooden planks together using coconut fiber. This made the hulls super flexible and durable. They had massive troop carriers, specialized boats just for transporting war elephants across the ocean, and get this, shipboard flamethrowers for close quarters naval combat. Backing up that high-tech fleet was a staggering 1 million naval soldiers, sailors, and support staff. 1 million. They even recruited coastal fishermen and highly trained pearl divers to act like ancient special ops, literally swimming underwater to covertly sabotage enemy ship rudders.
All right, let's get into the action with Section 4, the Srivijaya surprise attack in 1025 CE.
So, here's the spark that set it all off. The rival Srivijaya Empire, based in modern-day Indonesia and Malaysia, decided they wanted absolute control. They basically engaged in blatant economic warfare by paying off coastal communities to act as pirates. They were pirating any ship that didn't stop at Srivijayan ports, cutting the Chola guilds completely out of the loop. So, the battle lines were drawn. You had the Chola Empire teaming up with the Khmer Empire of Angkor on one side against the Srivijaya and Tamberlinga coalition on the other. This wasn't just some small border skirmish. This was essentially a massive, multi-regional world war of the 11th century. And Emperor Rajendra Chola's strategy was nothing short of audacious. Srivijaya naturally assumed the attack would come through the predictable Straits of Malacca, so they heavily guarded it. Well, Rajendra sent a decoy fleet there, but he took his main armada totally south of Sumatra. He literally sailed through treacherous monsoon winds, which was thought to be impossible, just to strike the enemy capital from behind. The speed of this invasion was absolutely terrifying. In month 1, they navigate the storm. By month 2, they surprise attack and sack the capital. Month 3, a deadly pincer movement wipes out the waiting Srivijayan defensive fleet. And by month 4, they've captured the king as a prisoner of war. They completely dismantled a multi-century dynasty in a matter of months. Finally, Section 5, Legacy of the Thalassocracy, an Empire's Echo. You see, the Cholas didn't just conquer and head home, they fundamentally altered the geopolitical landscape. By leaving permanent military garrisons in Southeast Asia, they established this pseudo-colonial presence. It basically ensured that the Tamil trade guilds could totally dominate the commercial centers for over a century without any pesky competition. And the financial return was unbelievable. Decades later, a single Chola trade embassy to China came back with a profit of 81,800 strings of copper coins. To put that into perspective, that is tens of thousands of pounds of raw physical currency flooding directly into their treasury. Just a massive, lasting economic victory. The legacy of the Chola Empire is still incredibly visible today. They spread deep cultural influence across Southeast Asia and brought unprecedented interconnectedness to the Indian Ocean economy. In fact, their mastery of the seas was so legendary that the modern Indian Navy actually officially celebrated the 1000th anniversary of Rajendra Chola's succession, drawing direct strategic inspiration from him. So I'll leave you with a thought to ponder. How do 1,000-year-old naval wars over port customs change the way we look at modern global trade choke points? The next time you see headlines about a blocked shipping lane or a supply chain crisis, just remember, the epic struggle to rule global trade routes is nothing new. 1,000 years ago, a dynasty from South India was out there, brilliantly and aggressively ruling the waves.